ATACS, ATACS, ATACS. Ladies and gentlemen, ATACS. Adults talking about cool stuff. Episode number 19. It is the middle of August, and it's not really been that hot as far as summers go. I'm your host, Paul from Atlanta, and I'm pretty happy about that. Joining us today is Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina. How you doing, Will?
Pretty good. You see, you're pretty happy about the fact that summer's cool, or the fact that you're from Atlanta?
So I'm not definitely not the second part. It's definitely more the first part because we've gotten through the hottest part of the summer and we haven't had any 100-degree days, and that's been nice.
So you're saying that global warming doesn't exist?
You know what? We're going to roll right on into Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. How are you, Flex?
I'm doing pretty good. It's also worth noting that the summer isn't over yet, Paul, so there's still time for that 100 degrees to get you.
You're right, but that doesn't mean that I can't be happy that it hasn't came here yet.
I'm just trying to spoil your mood, Paul.
That's very nice of you. And from New York, New York, Mr. Ryan. How are you doing, Ryan?
I am wonderful.
I know it's technically Manhattan, but New York, New York just sounds better, you know?
Like ATACS, ATACS, ATACS.
Like ATACS, 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 exactly.
I mean, repetition is a wonderful thing.
Just a minor housekeeping note, we do not have a website, so great. Also,
but if we did, it would be ATACS.com.
Or ATACS.zone. I'm just saying, we could be in the attack zone.
I like the way you think, Paul.
Yeah, we'll just, Ryan, just get on that. That'd be great. Can you have that up by next week? Cool.
Maybe.
And last but not least is Mr. Nate from Wendell, North Carolina. Hey, Nate, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing good.
Good. So wanted to plug something real quick before we get into talking about video games. Most of our international fans have seen it, but we have put up a Horizon Zero Dawn spoiler cast. That was Flex and Ryan and Nate. They did that yesterday.
Spoiled.
So if you would like to be spoiled about all things Horizon Zero Dawn and hear some conversation around that, you can find it in the same place that you find all of our podcasts. So, you know, go and take a look at that. But we're going to talk about video games now because that's kind of what we are here to do. Also talk about other cool stuff. Mr. Will, what's been going on over in your neck of the woods?
Woo! Right to me.
You're number one, baby.
Okay. Well, I guess I have maybe two games that are probably the most interesting. I remember last time I just threw out a laundry list and let the crew pick.
Not today.
Not today. It's on me. So I think the first thing that I've been playing, or that I finished playing recently, that was really different, was a game called Masochisia.
What is that?
Yeah, it's Masochisia. I don't know.
Tell me, you hate yourself.
It's a Steam game, which doesn't really mean anything in any way. It means it's a PC game, I guess. But it's kind of an adventure title in a sense, where you are kind of walking around, interacting with characters. How about that?
Wow.
But basically, you're playing through a simulation or a version of a serial killer's life. And the serial killer is actually based on a true guy named Albert Fish, which is really, he did some really heinous things. But the game is kind of trying to sort of, it seems to sort of kind of explore what it would be like to play through the childhood of this type of dude. And his childhood is just about as horrific as you can imagine. You interact with his mother and his father and his brother, who is also pretty disturbed. I think in some ways it's sort of trying to have you attempt to sort of understand or empathize with what might kind of cause someone to end up being the way that he ended up being. And you also sort of meet some celestial characters like an angel and a demon, and they sort of are stand-ins in a sense for fate, I guess. You know, so they kind of give him directives that he can sort of sometimes choose to act against them or choose to kind of act towards them or in accordance with them. But it's the type of thing that really gets you thinking. I don't know that it's the type of game that I landed anywhere. At the end of it, I was like, well, he could have been a different dude, or or vice versa. I mean,
well, that was a video game. It's like,
yeah. So,
gotcha.
but it definitely was a thought-provoking thing, and I definitely applaud the the creator for attempting to sort of tread where he did, because it's definitely different than probably just about anything I've ever played. Of course, I will say that in most modern games, I mean, you kind of play as a serial killer anyway.
I mean, no one ever wants to talk about the body count in any of the Uncharted games. But
I mean,
does Nathan Drake kill a lot of people?
I played as Nathan Drake. I killed some fools.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of do it anyway, but I think, this game tries to make it a little bit more meaningful. And it really is like there's some certain scenes in it that really make your skin crawl. I mean, I'll just say that among the victims of this particular serial killer were children. And also, the character designs themselves of the father and the mother are sort of purposefully unnerving. To where you don't really want to like look at the screen. They're kind of, jittery and exaggerated caricatures. So it's really kind of a disconcerting thing. So it's a weird thing because on the one hand, it's not the type of game that you'd play and say, well, that was a really good time.
So I mean, because I was just looking at it while you were talking, because I have not even heard of this game, and it certainly seems like something that I would be assigned to play in some psychological profiling class. It doesn't look like something that I'm going to ever just go and find myself.
Yeah. So I don't know. I did go and find it myself, but that probably says something about me. But anyway, so I don't know if anyone. It's one of these things where it's like I liked it, but like I said, I can't say it's fun. But I liked it.
Was it? Did you find it worth playing?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. And it's not particularly long. I think it took me about an hour and a half total to knock it out.
And how was the multiplayer?
It was horrifying. No, I don't know. Was there multiplayer? I don't think so.
This is a third-person cover shooter.
I mean,
right?
team deathmatch, capture the flag, all of that there.
Yeah. I mean, in most games featuring serial killers, there is a team deathmatch.
Yeah, I mean, and you prestiged, right?
Oh man, prestiging in this game is pretty gnarly.
Fowler, I think you might be thinking about something different.
I don't know where I am right now.
All right, sorry, I entered the wrong interview here. My bad.
Yeah. So, and the other game I guess I played a couple of things over the past 2 weeks, but the other thing I played that I probably thought was the most interesting was a game that I've had my eye on a while called The Magic Circle. And that was I think that's been ported to different consoles now as well. But it's sort of the premise of that one is you're a character that is playtesting an unfinished game, and you interact with. It's interesting because as you walk through the game, you can hear the voices of the different people who are working on the game. And some of them don't like certain aspects of it. So some of them do like certain aspects of it. Also, you interact with an entity that is sort of in the game, trapped in the game. And he's really, really frustrated because basically every time it seems like they're about to release the Magic Circle, they scrap the whole project and start from the beginning. And so in some ways it's kind of a commentary on the very, very, Fortnite just got released 2 weeks ago, and that's been in the works for a decade.
I think that they started that project in the 1960s.
So if you imagine if there was a living entity who was somehow indivisible from Fortnite, how frustrated he would be that every time he seemed like he was going to get released into the world. And I guess the game kind of plays with that idea of released, the game being released and the person being released, or this entity being released in the game. But And so the game is like this weird mishmash of styles. And so, part of it is sort of this weird sort of fantasy game where you're kind of walking around and encountering monsters. Then there's like a sci-fi portion of it that's kind of jammed in. Because basically you gain this ability to kind of recall things that had been deleted in the game. And so like you might be walking around in this fantasy world and then you turn and there's this like sci-fi moon base that's like definitely lower graphical quality. So you can tell it was like one of the previous builds of the game. But the interesting thing about it is that you basically gain this ability to kind of edit random monsters in the game. So you walk up and you might find a monster and you can edit him to make him into an ally. Then you can take the abilities from that monster and give them to other monsters in the game. And so that gets really, really funny. Because there's some little rats that you you can like put a rail gun on a rat and give him flying and he has these little wings and stuff.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. And so in some ways, I will say that I don't think that the satirical aspect of the game, because it really kind of reminds you guys probably of some of the other games that I end up liking, like Pony Island and stuff like that. So I don't know that the satirical aspect of the game is as strong in terms of, or even the beginner's guide in terms of making me think about game development and the experience of the player. But I will say that just the kind of puzzles that exist in the game and the humor is pretty good. It's pretty clever. So that was the other one I played that I thought.
Yeah, that one caught my eye when it came out a few years ago, and I never got around to it. But it like that idea of like, a creator dealing with his game as it's being created and rebooted and all that stuff. It seemed really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it is. I mean, and I will say that it's interesting because there's this one enemy that you probably spend most of the game trying to deal with. He's just a really, really powerful guy. And then his ability, and I don't know that I'm really spoiling anything by doing this, but his ability is called groupthink. So you can actually, if you give that ability to one of your minions that you've kind of recruited, it gives all of the minions of that type the same abilities. And so it's a really interesting jump that you go from having, maybe one guy who has a strong weapon on him, maybe you've equipped a dog with some flame-throwing breath or something, to suddenly you have this army of like super-powered guys. And so it's a trip.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty amusing.
It's a trip playing with those little abilities and just kind of seeing what you can do.
Yeah, and it sounds like a really interesting concept too, to like have this, sort of like these different pieces of like half finished projects just kind of bolted together in like a meta way.
That's kind of what it is, and some of the times, like I guess one of the other reasons that you might explore in the game is that you find these little audio clips that are supposedly from different groups of developers talking to each other, and so
really?
And some of them are just like absolutely like goofy, but you can kind of use them. I think part of the idea of the game is that you're going to end up using those clips to somehow embarrass the developers into like releasing the game or something like that.
Have you finished the game?
Yeah, I finished it. I think it was like 3 hours. So it's longer than some of these sort of, not much longer, but a little longer than some of these other kind of meta commentary satire games. But
Gotcha.
But I thought it was fun. I'd recommend it. I mean, in terms of the type of thing that's going to get you thinking about game development, I wouldn't say I'd recommend it over Beginner's Guide or Pony Island, but I will say that it's got a lot of clever things it's trying to do.
Did you play the Stanley Parable?
I did.
Okay. Is that in a similar vein, or?
Well, to me, like, I guess there's a, and I won't talk about it too much, but I guess there's a group of people out there who, like, for instance, and Flex has heard me talk about this a lot, who feel that, like, for instance, Telltale games are annoying because basically no matter what decision you make, it's kind of going to end the same way, you know? And I've always found like when
kind of like Mass Effect.
Yeah, and so I guess I've always found that like to me it's not really important that my decision ends up actually causing the game to completely change gears. To me, I guess in the moment that I'm making the decision, if it feels meaningful to me in that moment, then to me it doesn't really matter if in the end whatever happens. You know, and I think there is a subset of players who really get frustrated when they find that they've made all these decisions and then at the end whatever was going to happen. And to me, the Stanley Parable is for those gamers. Like, to me, that's the biggest takeaway. And I'm sure that because it's an artistic piece, people can have different takeaways from it. But that was the biggest overarching aspect of it to me. And I guess because it didn't really feel like something I necessarily needed to hear, it didn't resonate with me quite as much as some of the other titles did. But I mean, it was definitely clever. It was definitely funny. But I don't know that for me, you know, it quite resonated the same way.
And the reason I'm asking is, and you know, I guess I'm not sure how much our listeners will know about any of those games, is I didn't play the beginner's guide, so I have no. When you say it's similar,
and
this game is similar to
and the beginner's guide was by the same person who made the Stanley Parable, so it's like a kind of similar structure, but it's like the topic of discussion is a little different, which is I think where Will's drawing the differentiation.
That's why I was asking, is because for somebody who, like, if you were explaining this to somebody who hasn't played those games, like I played a little of Pony Island, didn't really like it, but I did like the Stanley Parable. I thought that game was hilarious, because of the way it pokes at not necessarily development itself, but like the issues or choices of, you know, game design,
narrative structure in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess the genre might be sort of like satirical metagames, I guess you might even call them.
Yeah.
If you had to kind of categorize all these things. But it's a genre that I'm usually interested in. So I end up spending some time talking about those games and playing them a lot. But that's where we are.
Yeah, and I mean any game that can kind of sit down and, you know, deliver a meaningful message about the creative and development process of games, I think is always kind of neat to see. So I'm glad to hear that, you know, you spent some time with this one and, you know, it ended up kind of giving you what you were looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
Nate, what's been happening? You're on break right now, so you should be able to talk about everything.
Yeah, well, my break has sadly come to an end, but I have been playing a fair amount of stuff. So, with that in mind, who wants to talk about Snake Pass?
Nope.
What is that?
All right. No, I actually don't have anything to say about Snake Pass, but I finished it. It's fine. I don't think it's anything super special. I talked about it. I wasn't on last episode, but I've talked about it on here at some point. But for Will, it is a game where you play a snake and you collect things. The snake's name is Noodle.
Okay.
He's a vegetarian.
All right.
And this is important character development. Don't miss it.
Yes. You slither around like a snake does, and you collect things, and then you go to the next level, and you do it again. And it's super charming and colorful and nice looking, but yeah, Would
you say that you're drawn to games with the user-defined tag cute?
Sure. I like a nice, colorful, like easygoing art style. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But anyway,
that's
I'm not gonna talk anymore about Snake Pass. The main games that I've finished that I haven't talked about since I finished were Nier, Automata, and Prey. Okay. So I could talk as much about either of those as you guys want me to.
I am very interested in hearing about Prey because, you know, I know that it kind of resonated with people differently. You know, it's interesting because the genre that it's in is one of my favorite genres. I mean, if anyone looks at my Steam profile page, it's like favorite game, BioShock.
Yeah.
You know, like I love that type of thing, but I've heard that in some ways it really pales in comparison to like some of the games that would also kind of fall in that genre.
Are you talking about immersive sims, Will?
Maybe I am.
I think he's talking about bathroom scrounging games.
Yes.
Yes.
The sci-fi bathroom scrounger is a really
it's a really underdeveloped genre. So anytime
so I guess what I'm curious about is, like, did it resonate with you? Did you find it immersive? Did you find it creative?
Yeah.
Was it hard?
What was the best thing you found in the bathroom?
Oh gosh.
Tough question. Life's difficult questions.
Yeah. So overall, I really, really liked Prey. Probably even more so than I expected to, even with BioShock being a game that I also love, and this being very similar.
Would you say that one's a superior experience?
I think that depends on what you're looking for.
Okay.
BioShock, I think a lot of people, probably you and myself included, definitely got a lot of value out of BioShock from its more philosophical questions and musings and things like that, which I would say this game doesn't have as much of that. There's some interesting dilemmas and questions about the nature of humanity and where should science go from here, and that those similar kinds of questions do arrive in Prey, but I wouldn't say they're as much a focus or as. I
mean, Nier already had that covered for this year, right?
That's also true. If you want a game that makes you question the meaning of life and existence and eternal struggle, then play Nier Automata.
And robot panties.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, that all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
So
did you find any robot panties in the bathrooms in Prey?
I did not.
How good would you say the world building is? Because there's some moments where, especially in some of those types of games, they're just like dripping, with atmosphere. So were there times that you really felt, like immersed in that same way?
Yeah,
like
totally.
Maybe like Fort Frolic or something like that.
This has a lot of that good environment design, good little drip feed of narrative throughout, and you get more of that the more time you spend sort of scrounging around and reading emails and that kind of stuff. I would say that you talk about like the different areas of BioShock's Rapture and how they have like these certain memories you might have associated with them or different storylines associated with them. This has a lot of that same style of world building. It all takes place on a space station, and there are different areas that you move between. And one thing that they do that's really cool is that every character that exists on the space station is named and has like backstory to them. So you really start to see names like pop up multiple times in different emails or audio logs or that kind of thing, and start to see some of the relationships that exist on the station. And then there's, you find security stations and you can actually look through a list of everyone on the station and activate their tracking bracelet and then go find them.
A Dr. Suchong, if you will.
Right. So it does a really good job of building a wide cast of characters, even though, spoilers, I guess most of them are dead, but
I don't think that's a spoiler. I'm pretty sure
I
that's
don't
what they
think
tell
so.
you on like the front of the box. Go to a space station, everyone's dead.
I think the sci-fi bathroom searcher genre has a lot of post-apocalyptic type of post-disaster.
That's inherent with the genre.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can't think of sci-fi bathroom searcher without thinking.
I mean, I scrounged bathrooms in Dead Space, and there are a lot of dead things there.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why it's called Dead Space.
If everything was hunky-dory, then there wouldn't be anything useful in the bathroom. So
exactly.
Right.
So Nate, I've actually got a question for you. One of the things that I've been reading about is that this game is pretty rough on the difficulty scale. Did you finish it on normal, or did you bump it down to easy? Or
I played it on hard.
What?
Oh, yeah. I bumped it up one from the normal because I hadn't heard that before I played it, and it was
Nate's
difficult.
hardcore.
It was difficult, but I didn't find it like impossible.
Okay.
I have
Internet
another
is
question.
kinda
Go
weak.
ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say the internet lately has been seeming a little weak on the difficulty, but I digress.
Noob.
Gotta get
Ryan
good.
throwing some shade at the internet.
No,
It's,
what I would say about the difficulty, real quick. I think one thing that's really strong about this game is that all the enemies are interesting, and at least on the hard difficulty, and this is probably what some people experience with other difficulties as well, is that any one enemy can kill you if you're not aware of it, or just like mess up, or not on your game, or you're out of stuff. Like any enemy in this game is dangerous, and they all have different abilities. So managing that and like making sure you have things available, which by the end, of course, if you're scrounging like I was, then you have way too much of everything. But
Yeah,
that is a real thing in this game, is that you will die if you're not focused and paying attention.
yeah. Assuming this game is similar to your Bioshocks and Deus Ex and those kind of things, is that like you can get around a lot of difficulty by scrounging and searching every corner, and like you can in these kinds of games that I played, you can get really overpowered if you just look around everywhere. And I would guess, this is purely a guess, but I would guess a lot of the times when people find this stuff hard is because they're just trying to run through it and not really like looking around or paying attention to things.
Yeah, I mean, you have a wide variety of weapons. It's not like a ton, but you get like 7 or 8 different weapons throughout the game, and only like 2 of them are just like straight up, I'm going to deal damage weapons.
Gotcha.
So it's not like an open run and gun firefight sort of game. You're crouching around, you're watching your enemies, you're kind of making a game plan and maybe laying a trap or something somewhere, try to stun your enemies and get up behind them, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I also have a follow-up question about Prey, and I don't remember if we discussed this on ATACS or not, but there was, getting back to some of our meta development discussion, there was, I think I heard like that the reviews for Prey might have suffered because of some of Bethesda's kind of, was this a Bethesda game? They kind of tried to lock down
Was this
review copies.
was this the game that like someone posted like a 1 out of 10 because like a bug prevented them from finishing the game or something like that, or was that a different game?
I don't know. I hadn't seen that, but it could
I think
be.
that's every game.
Oh, okay. Right.
Most recently, that was Hellblade, Jim Sterling.
Yeah, I know Hellblade hit that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but there was a game earlier in the summer, and I feel like it was Prey, but
It might have
anyway,
been.
I could be wrong.
It might have been.
I know some reviewers were unhappy, and reasonably so, that because Bethesda was trying to lock them out, that they weren't able to give the game like a thorough.
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't have any perspective on that?
Yeah, and that's a different discussion, I guess. But I don't know. I really like Prey a lot. I think if you haven't been spoiled on anything about it, the opening it was like super strong. Without saying anything else. So like if you don't know anything going into that game, just don't look up anything and then play through the intro, because it's a really cool introduction to that game.
How do the skills and abilities work? Like, is there, I guess, can you take all the abilities? Are there multiple viable builds that you think you could do? Do you kind
I was
of
going to ask the same thing.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like there are multiple viable builds. Obviously, I haven't tried multiple builds, but there are a lot of skills. They're like, I think there are like 6 skill trees.
What are your skill, like, because in Bioshock you got, in those things, like you got a lot of variation from like what kind of tonics and powers you chose to equip and upgrade, and like Deus Ex you have like a lot of your cyberpunk like augmentation abilities. Like what is the nature of your upgrades in this game?
There's a little bit of a mixture of those two styles. So you've got all of your guns that you can upgrade by finding weapon upgrade kits or building them. So one thing that this game does is everything can be recycled at specific stations that just turn it into raw ingredients of a couple of different types, and then you can use those raw ingredients at other stations to create items. So you can kind of build more like weapon upgrade kits if you want, or you can build more of what are the sort of plasmid equivalents from BioShock, which are called neuromods, that give you like real big upgrades on the skill trees. So you have your weapons that you upgrade, you have skill tree unlocks from the neuromods, and then you also have some slots in your space suit and your space visor that you can install chips into that give you different abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a fair amount, like permanent.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
Permanent progression through like weapon upgrades and the neuromods, and then some like on the fly customization through your suit stuff, which wasn't super meaningful, but like, you know, you get a little bit of stuff there.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the powers are pretty wild, I would say. And I don't know how much of this would be considered a spoiler. I'm pretty sure they showed some of this stuff pre-release, but you can get alien powers.
Ooh.
They advertised that pre-release. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. That. So the main enemies you're fighting are these aliens called the Typhon, and they have all sorts of weird abilities, including the mimics, which are little oily black spider creatures that turn into any object in the environment and lie in wait for you to walk by and then jump out at you.
That sounds terrifying.
It really ups the suspense in that game, early game, so much, because you walk into any room and like, there's a coffee cup on that table. I don't know if that coffee cup was there before when I walked through here.
I wonder if I need to shoot that coffee cup just to make sure.
Yeah, that's exactly what it causes over and over. But then later in the game, you get the ability to start unlocking any of those alien abilities, including the ability to turn into coffee cups.
So, actually, that brings up something kind of neat. Like, if this is a scrounging game, how scared were you to scrounge because you thought you might scrounge a black goose spider?
Early game, it's a pretty suspenseful thing. Like, you get used to it, and you get more abilities and more ways to deal with that. But early game, it's like, yeah, if I am just running through environments, I'm going to get killed by one of these mimics.
And that is the most interesting thing that you found in a bathroom.
Yeah, there you go.
I had one more question.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I'm making you. You might have had things that you actually wanted to say about this game rather than just answering my questions.
You're fine.
This is Arcane, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned that there's a lot of. Do you feel like there's a lot of stealth in it?
There can be. There are definitely upgrades. You're going to want to use stealth, I think, probably no matter what. There are upgrades to make you more powerful in stealth.
Yeah, and the only reason I guess I bring that up is because their previous effort, I guess, would be Dishonored 2. But I played Dishonored 1, and actually, and I'm probably in the minority on this, but I didn't find the stealth really very well done.
I didn't either.
I didn't either.
So would you say that this game does it better, or that it's a similar kind of approach to stealth, or?
I would say, I'm trying to remember all the specifics of Dishonored's stealth system. I think part of the problem that I remember having with Dishonored was that it felt like the game was telling me I could play anyway, but then it was like, oh, if you don't stealth through everything and not get seen, then you messed up. And that was sort of the problem I had with that.
I also thought the feedback it had for stealth was pretty poor. Like, it was really hard to tell when things could see you.
Yeah. Right. And this maybe does have a little bit of that, where like sometimes I would be like, oh, how did he see me? But I don't know. I felt like it was less necessary, I guess.
Okay. Also, I think Arcane has two teams because Dishonored 2 came out last fall. So pretty sure these two games were in development simultaneously. So I don't know how much shared blood there is between those two teams.
Right. Yeah. I would say probably like the stealth is a little more forgiving than what I remember from Dishonored, and a little less necessary, so it just didn't feel as cumbersome. Bad. Yeah, didn't feel as bad. It was a case where like if I got up behind something without it seeing me, that was like a good bonus, but it wasn't like the end of the world if I got spotted.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Well, cool. I'm glad you liked it, man.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing that. That'll actually probably be something I'll try and do soon.
Yeah, and there's some good story work and character work in there too. Like the nature of that game and its intro and how it sets everything up just kind of puts you as the player and your character in a like weird position where like you don't really know what is real and what isn't, and they kind of drag that out as far as they can possibly take it, which is fun to go through.
Oh, that sounds kind of neat.
Yeah.
So now has anyone else have any questions? Have we gotten through the adults talking about Prey cast?
I don't have a question, but a clarification. I did look it up, and IGN gave Prey a 4 out of 10 because they hit a game-breaking bug.
Yeah, that's weird. I didn't have any real bugs, but I didn't play it right at release either.
Yeah, and I mean, just as a quick aside, I still feel like that is the best way to play video games right now. Let everyone else beta test for 2 or 3 months, and then go in and get whatever patch it is that they've.
Yeah, I think that bug has been patched at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you said you played a couple of things.
Yeah, so I've played that all the way through. I had talked about Nier some when I was playing it before, but now I've finished it. It's kind of hard to say much more about it other than that game just keeps going places and it is great. It's totally bananas, and yeah, I don't know. It's anime, but it's also like super like insightful in some instances, and then super anime and dumb in a lot of instances.
So it's just all of life mixed into one.
Where did you kind of land on it? Because for me, I played about 1.5 playthroughs, and I thought the meta story was kind of crude. I thought the gameplay was kind of rote and boring, like outside of.
So I enjoyed
some the.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I enjoyed the gameplay overall. I don't think that's where the game is gonna live or die for anyone. It's good enough that I don't think it's offensive, but it's not spectacular enough for anybody to love it, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I think the story, if you're just talking about like plot points and the main characters and what happens in the game, is pretty silly. So I think where I kind of landed on that is that I think the people who really love it and get a lot out of it are probably people who are more inclined to see and think about like underlying themes behind a storyline rather than the actual plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to assign value to either of those either. I just think it's a slightly different way of thinking. And I didn't get a whole lot out of the story itself, but I can see how there are some deeper themes hiding there that I'm sure were intentional, but aren't maybe communicated super well. That if people pick up on and run with those, and then talk about those specifics with somebody else who has the same mindset, then I think there is a lot to get there.
Yeah,
well, that's the thing, though, is that I kind of sensed some of what they were going for in their commentary about, I guess, the human condition or however you want to label it, but I felt like it was going in a direction I didn't really. I kind of got it, and I was kind of like, I don't agree with or like what you're saying. So
you just like personally dislike the message, or you dislike the way they're conveying the message?
The message, right?
Yeah,
well,
okay.
And the way they're conveying the message,
Sure.
Both, because
I mean, Ryan really needed more robot panties to make it click with him.
Yeah, I mean that. Well, and that's part of it, right? That's probably like it's probably very intentional that's like so anime and in your face.
That's
like
the part of the dumb anime part of the game that makes it seem kind of gross. But
part of the commentary, though, is So anyway,
are you like happy you got, because it's 5 endings A through E are the quote unquote story ones? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you glad? Like, did you enjoy it enough that you're glad you went through all of those? Or
yes,
okay,
yeah, 100%, yeah. I'm not down on the game at all. Like, I know it has problems, but like I don't. By the time I finished that last ending, I didn't care about any of those problems. I was just like, all right, yeah, game.
Okay, so in the end, you did. I guess that's what I was trying to get. Like in the end, did you like the story stuff and where it went?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did for sure. I like I said, I don't think the actual like storyline, plot line, whatever you want to call that, where like the events happening in the game world were like super meaningful or revelatory or whatever, but the journey or the
existential journey.
Yeah, sure. The winding journey that it takes you on and the questions that it asks, and then it doesn't necessarily even try to answer them for you. It's interesting, and I thought it was a cool effect. And then the last ending, I guess I shouldn't say what happens, anything about it. There's a mechanical thing that other people have talked about online, but it's really ridiculous.
Great.
If you don't mind spoilers, I think the honest trailers for that game is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, no, there's so much you could poke fun at in this game. Like, I would not deny that at all.
Yeah, it seems like an easy one to
really
poke at.
entertaining.
Yeah, I saw you you tweeted about your cat contemplating existence after you finished.
After I finished that, my cat was staring out the window, and I was like, "Yeah, I feel you, cat."
Bro.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, Steph actually bounced off of that. I don't know if she's gonna play, if she's planning on going back and playing it or not, but I don't even think she got to the first ending. So it's still on my to play list, but it feels like it's Ryan says he bounced off of it. Steph bounced off of it. You finished it, so I guess it's one of those. Like, you either like it or you don't kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those games that, like, and this happens every now and then. I've noticed is like a lot of time, like the majority of the time, like I can look at games, read reviews, like get feedback from other people like you guys who play it, and it's like I can kind of figure out if I'll like it or not, like based on talking with you all or reading stuff online. I feel like this is the rare game that comes around maybe a few times a year where it's like you just kind of like until you play it, you just don't really know.
And that's because
it's going to click with you or not.
Yeah, that's because it relies so heavily on its late game themes and ideas that unless you just want to spoil it for you, you won't know if you care about any of that.
Right, and then I guess by that point, once you know what the spoiler is, it's like, oh well, that kind of takes away your motivation to finish the game. So
somewhat, yeah.
So, all right. Well, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about, Nate?
The other main thing I've been playing, but I haven't finished yet, is Pyre, which I think we're also going to talk about elsewhere. So,
all right. So we'll table the Pyre discussion for a little bit, but let's see. I think
So, Nate, when you were in bathrooms in Prey, did you ever find a Native American with a bow and arrow?
No.
Okay.
That's a very specific question.
That's a very specific reference to.
There was a game called Prey where you played as a Native American with a bow and arrow, and I was just trying to see the connection.
I don't think there is one, Will.
Okay. All right.
It just shares a name.
Is there
somewhere? That's actually the super secret ending. Is you find that guy with the bow and arrow.
That would be so great if there was something like that in there.
That's funny. All right. Well, I think we're probably going to take a quick break, and then whenever we come back, we will see what's been happening with Mr. Flex and Mr. Ryan and myself. And so stick around. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, members of our international audience, we have returned from our break. I now have a sandwich and a Coke Zero, which is the last Coke Zero because they're switching the way that they're making Coke Zeros, which has me very upset. You're listening to Adults Talking About Cool Stuff. This is episode number 19, and Mr. Ryan, putting you on the spot. What you been playing?
Oh, well, I've been playing a lot, but I think the most interesting things to talk about are two games. The first, let's start with, so I just finished playing a game called Torment, Tides of Numenera.
I have heard of that one.
Yeah. I liked it. I thought it was good. Maybe comparing it to a recent, I guess it's CRPG is the genre. Mm-hmm. I played Tyranny, I think about a year ago, and I probably like Torment, this game, a little better than Tyranny, but they're pretty close. They feel like they're, kind of in that same CRPG mold with pretty good writing and story.
Yeah.
I guess a couple things to note about Torment that are a little bit interesting and unique. So one thing they do that I like in terms of gameplay is that they do this system where they call it like an effort system. So in other CRPG style games, like when it comes to dialogue choices, there are different ways to handle like expressing your character, right? So like if I'm playing Shadowrun or Tyranny or some game and I've spec'd my character into strength and like I come to a dialogue choice or, some obstacle, it might give me like a hard stat check and say, okay, well, because your character has 16 strength, like you can try moving this boulder, right? Or, because your character is really intelligent or really persuasive, like they can, you get like a dialogue option to kind of reward you for building your character a certain way. The way that Torment kind of handles that is they basically have like a difficulty check.
Okay.
So your character has 3 different stats, and you do also have skills and specializations like, different types of lore, persuasion, maybe intimidation, some of your skills that you can train in. But whenever you come to a difficulty check, like if I'm in a dialogue and I want to intimidate somebody or persuade them, my character and each of my party members basically has 3 stat pools, not counting your health. So you have your strength, or it's called might, quickness, and intellect. And so when I come to a conversation, I might have an option to intimidate or persuade, but the way the game handles that is when I select that option, it gives me like basically like a roll, but it also allows me, it says, okay, how much of your, like for intimidate check, you have to use your might stat. So it's like, all right, which character do you want to make this check, and how much of your effort do you want to spend? So I could spend, let's say, 5 points of my might stat to give myself a really high chance of succeeding at an intimidate roll. But if I'm trained in it, I can be more successful with less effort. Or if my character is, it basically is like kind of trained for strength. Like, so it has kind of this interesting system. Like I wouldn't say it's revolutionary or groundbreaking, but it felt a lot more flexible than some of those static checks. Because some of the games that follow this formula, they have like, okay, what's your main character spec'd in, and do they meet this minimum threshold? Whereas in Torment, you can, even if I'm not good at some skill or something, I can either choose to spend a lot of my resource, so I can spend like all of my intellect or a huge chunk of my intellect trying to do something.
Right.
That turns into sort of a resource management type thing.
And when do you get that back? Like if you spend like all your might on something, like how do you get those points back?
Aside from healing items, you restore all that when you rest.
Okay.
The one thing the game does do that I think is kind of neat, though, is that at times there are, sometimes you can't rest because you're like between segments, but at times also they put maybe some story pressure on you to not rest. So it's like if you rest, then maybe like you see like quests advancing and like options going away.
That's good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So I think, it allowed a lot more flexibility because, for one thing, I could pull in my party members and it rewards you for kind of, specializing your party members in different ways, and having like a versatile party, but it also, it gives you a way to to be more flexible. It's like, okay, well, if I really want to do this thing and I'm not good at it, I can still spend a lot to give myself a high chance of success. And, of course you can game it, but it felt like there were a lot more dialogue options to kind of do what you want.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The other thing I guess that's interesting about Torment is that they kind of call themselves a spiritual successor to Planescape Torment.
Planescape?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I don't think it quite is, and I think it's gotten some community backlash because of the differences. But I mean, I think Tides of Numenera stands pretty well on its own. It's just that I don't know.
Did you play the original Torment?
Yeah, like a decade and a half ago. It's been a long time.
Okay.
But
are they in a similar mold?
The gameplay systems are different, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, you would hope so with this much time passing.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, like Tides of Numenera uses like this effort system, and it uses turn-based combat, whereas the original Torment was a bit more in like the Baldur's Gate mold, maybe with some refinements. But I think the thing about it is it's kind of hard to put your finger on, and it's been a long time since I played the original Torment, but the original Torment was kind of unique, and I don't know, it had like some unique kind of novel writing, very new, like different when it came out. Whereas Tides of Numenera, like in terms of writing, it does try to follow some of the patterns from the original game, and I guess it loses, some of that novelty and uniqueness. So yeah, it's kind of a tough act to follow, and by kind of putting themselves in that position, even though they've made an interesting game and an interesting story, it gives them, I guess, a stick that they can be measured against, for better or for worse.
Okay. So how long was it?
I'm not exactly sure. It felt a little longer than a game like Tyranny, maybe around 40 hours.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's and I think I still have one of those games that Will actually bought me for a birthday that I downloaded. I played it for like an hour, and then I went, "This is real big. I don't know if I can really get into this right now." And that was like 2 years ago. So I still can't really get into those CRPGs very well.
It's been really cool to see a resurgence, because I was a big fan of some of those back in the day. I mean, the genre got a little bloated, I think, and a little formulaic, and it kind of died off for about a decade. But it's really cool to see a resurgence of games like Tyranny and Torment, and I haven't gotten to Pillars yet, but I really want to play Pillars of Eternity as well.
Yeah, Pillars is the one that I got and played for a little bit. Put it down for just long enough not to remember what I was doing, and just never started it back up again for whatever reason.
I think Pillars of Eternity 2 is in the works.
Yeah.
And Divinity Original Sin was another big one.
Mm-hmm.
Which the sequel to that is also coming out soon.
Yep.
That's funny. So was that all that you wanted to talk about for that one, Ryan, or did you want to bring up anything else?
Yeah, for Torment, unless you guys have anything else, that's all I've got to say on that.
Okay.
I did want to also talk about, I'm pretty close to finishing Majora's Mask. I've been playing the 3DS.
Throwback.
Yeah, I picked it up, played it.
Classic game alert.
Put it down for a little bit, almost gave it up. And I picked it back up and kind of jumped back into it. And I can say, like, I can see why the reviews for that game are so mixed. Like, overall, I've enjoyed it, but there have definitely been times where I've just kind of felt like, I'm not sure if I want to do this anymore.
Yeah, it's a very different. Well, yeah. I won't say very different, because like it still has a lot of the same Zelda items and like dungeon structure type stuff, but It is noticeably different from most Zelda games from the SNES through the Wii.
And they do
in that structure. So like it is in the ways it's different. It was probably one of the most divisive Zelda games.
Yeah, and I mean they do some really cool things with it, like the core concepts, like kind of having to relive these days, and like you learn this town and these areas inside and out, and there are all these side quests, and there's a giant moon hanging in the sky that smashes into the earth every 3 days. Like there's a lot of cool stuff they do.
That moon looks real gnarly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to see how time progresses, and sometimes with the side quests, if you step in and do one thing, it can change like how events play out in a contained way, but still like. But then like on the other hand, like it's sometimes like it's an inherently tedious game mechanic because you are literally redoing and retreading the same ground time and time and time again. Especially if you run out of time, like middle of a dungeon, it's like, okay, well now I've got to reset, rewind, come back to this place, redo all of this dungeon. Like it definitely has its weaknesses in terms of gameplay. And the other thing I guess I'll say about it before I hush is just that as a follow-up to Ocarina of Time, I didn't play it back when I played Ocarina, but even now, again, a decade and a half after playing Ocarina, some of the best and the worst parts of Majora's Mask just feel familiar in like a reused way. So when they do something really cool and interesting, a lot of times it's like, oh, I've seen this before,
Yeah,
to
they
varying
literally
degrees.
reuse assets in that game.
Yeah, I mean,
from Ocarina.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the few Zeldas where that's one of maybe 2 or 3 Zeldas where it occurred on the same system, so they were able to reuse the actual art assets and stuff. So like there is a lot of reused material. And Majora's Mask, I think they also developed in like a year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they
it was
had a
super
very
fast.
short. Yeah, they had a very short time to turn that game around, which is part of why I think they did the time structure in that game they did, because it allowed them to get more mileage out of making less, making less stuff, because they just didn't have time.
But it is a weird case of like you see a literal character model from Ocarina of Time who's like maybe got a different colored shirt and he's a different person. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
I've seen you before.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when they don't, I mean, it's like, I'm using a mirror shield, and even though the mirror shield looks different, like that game mechanic is exactly 100% identical to what it was in the previous game. So anyway, yeah, I can kind of see why it's such a mixed.
Yeah, I think the people who really get into it is like the main through line of that game is it's fairly short, and it is a lot of managing that time and making sure it's like, all right, when I'm ready to do a dungeon, I start the day, I slow down time, I go do the dungeon, and you don't really have time to dilly-dally because like you said, if you run out of time, you have to redo stuff. So like if you're kind of going straight through the game, like you're doing a lot of stuff like that, and it can be a little tedious, and the game's not very long, so like they don't get that ambitious with like dungeon design stuff. But then I think the people who get really into that game are the people who really get invested in like the townsfolk and all the side quests and getting the masks, and because that's when you really get into like kind of the clockwork nature of seeing the 3 days over and over, and like really learning what people are doing and where they're going to be and like how to manipulate all that stuff. And there's a lot of interesting and honestly sometimes very depressing like side stories in that game. That is by far the darkest Zelda game.
Yeah, that is very
in terms of like tone and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people really get into that game about.
Yeah, and to clarify, I mean, I have finished almost all of the side quests at this point. And yeah, I do feel like that. Not all of them, but a lot of those are kind of where that game is the most interesting. And I would love to see, not necessarily Nintendo, but some other developer play with the same concept in terms of like, maybe take out some of the dungeoning stuff and just focus on, how like changing time can affect a series of side quests or quests basically and interactions. But yeah.
So, and it's kind of interesting whenever you think about it. Like, that's one of those games where the people who really like that game, they will argue with you on the internet, on the streets, wherever you want to argue. They will argue with you that it is the best Zelda game in the entire series, hands down.
Yep.
And we
should have brought in our good friend Garrison for this episode.
Yeah,
one of those.
Could have brought in Garrison, and like I played it, I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I liked Ocarina, but at the same time, I don't really have a big passion around it, one way or the other. It's like that was a Zelda game, So
yeah.
I don't know.
That's how I was at the time. I was pretty middle of the road. It's actually the one Zelda game I would like to replay because I feel like a lot of the stuff, because I played it when it first came out, so I was, relatively young, and like I feel like a lot of the stuff in that game kind of went over my head at the time. So it's the one Zelda game I feel like I may want to revisit again someday.
Yeah, and it's also on my to play list again because I played through Ocarina on the 3DS, and I was wanting to pick up Majora's Mask just to have both of them in that format, and haven't gotten around to it yet. But I'm also curious to see what the eyes of a much older Paul sees versus what I saw back when I played it back in the day. So anyway, so. Is that all that you wanted to talk about, Mr. Ryan, or did you have another game that's been burning a hole in your pocket?
That's good for me.
All right. Mr. Flex, last not least, you've been playing everything.
Well, I have not played everything yet. I did buy it in the Steam sale, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So it is on my list. One of these days, I will talk about everything. But in lieu of playing everything, it's actually a good segue from Majora's Mask 3D because I am now the proud new owner of a new Nintendo 2DS.
Yay! Clap, 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 clap. I'm planning on getting one of those.
So if I do ever play Majora's Mask again and I play it on that, I will get to make use of some of its additions, like the C-stick nub, whatever they call it, and the ZL, ZR, and it'll actually feel like playing it with a proper controller in some ways.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know how that works. I'm planning on picking up one of those as soon as I can get off my bum and send some stuff into Amazon for some credit. So
yeah, I kind of went ahead and did it because part of me is kind of afraid that there won't be stock for long, given Nintendo's recent history. So
that's a fair fear.
I don't know.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't know how what their plans are for this, but I went ahead and jumped on it. And I had kind of been wanting a new model for my 3D because I have an original model that I got not long after the system launched, and it's honestly just kind of beat up at this point.
Did you pick up it? Did you pick up the 3DS early enough to be part of the ambassador program?
No, I was just outside of that. I got it probably 3 or 4 months after they did the ambassador program thing. So.
Gotcha.
I was within the first year of launch, but not quite soon enough to get the ambassador stuff, which kind of bummed me out at the time because I wanted some of those games.
Yep.
But yeah, I still had an original model 3DS, and I had it since about a year after launch. So it was pretty beat up, and there's still a handful of 3DS games I want to play, and the form factor of the new 2DS just seems really nice.
How does it feel?
It feels real good. So you know how the original 3DS is the corners of it are kind of pointed and rectangular. The new 2DS is a lot smoother, a lot more rounded. The size of it fits better in my hand. So just ergonomically, the system as a whole it's a noticeable step up from that original model.
Okay.
It's also lighter because they took out it's called a 2DS because they took out the 3D aspect of it, which makes it lighter. So, in addition to just being shaped better, it's also lighter. So it feels a lot more comfortable to hold.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And, nothing about it is drastic other than that. It's all very quality of life improvements. But for someone who wanted kind of a replacement 3DS to have as my permanent one in my collection, and it's also the cheapest 3DS model they've ever released.
Yeah.
So all of that, it seemed like the right time to do it. And I'm pretty happy with it. Another fun fact is they the new 3DS and 2DS can play SNES games Virtual Console, which the original 3DS models cannot. So there is actually some extra processing power in the new lines that allow them to do that. And I think some games, like Majora's Mask 3D is actually one of them, and I think some of the Monster Hunter games, like there are some games that take advantage of the processing power in some ways and take advantage of the extra buttons. There are even some games, probably none I'll actually play, but like I know the 3DS version of both Xenoblade Chronicles and I think Hyrule Warriors like basically don't function on the original 3DS models. Mm-hmm. So like they need that extra power. But I don't know that any of that will actually be stuff I'll take advantage of. I mean, I do notice that just the general interface is a lot snappier. Like just running around the menus and that kind of stuff is noticeably snappier. So I definitely noticed the power, but it's really just an overall just improvement that's not necessary, but it's nice.
Okay. Are you actually playing anything on it right now, or did you just get it for a future game on your 3DS backlog list?
Yeah, I'm not playing anything on 3DS right now. I do have probably a half dozen DS or 3DS games on my backlog that I do want to play, so I will get use out of it, but I'm not playing anything right now. I did boot up. I did run 3 games on it just to see how it looked. So I played like 2 songs in Unden 2, and then I booted up Link to the Past on the Virtual Console, and then I played a few puzzles in Picross 3D Round 2. So I kind of put it through its paces. Sure. Yeah, the one potential downside is, and this is one of the reasons I held off on getting any of the XL, because the new 2DS only comes in the XL size.
Right.
Is compared to the original model 3DS that I had, all of the XL models, because the screens are bigger, it means the resolution's kind of stretched.
Right.
So the image is not quite as crisp as it was on my original model, which is a little bit of a bummer, but it's also not as bad as I feared it could be.
Does anyone know? I think I know the answer to this, but like, so you said that you got A Link to the Past on the Virtual Console for the 3DS. That there's no share between that and like the Switch. I mean, I know there's no Virtual Console games out on the Switch. Yeah. But do you know if they've announced whether there's like cross-buy kind of thing, or
there is no existing cross-buy on any platforms they've already put out. So like, if you wanted A Link to the Past on your Wii, your Wii U, and or your 3DS, like you would have to buy it on any of those individually that you wanted. They have
that's
to my knowledge. Yeah, it's really terrible. I mean, it's the ongoing saga of Nintendo's dumb online crap. They have not said anything about the Switch. So,
because I mean,
in a dream world, they could fix all of that with the Switch.
Because the Switch is going to be the console where I'm probably going to do the most digital downloads, just because I don't want to carry around a whole like stack of games along with the Switch if I'm going to go somewhere. But at the same time, it would be really nice if I could go and buy, some of those games on the Switch, and then it's like, hey, maybe Steph's playing something on the Switch, and I don't want to take it on like a week-long work trip. Being able to pop open the 2DS and play some of those same games would be great, but.
Yeah, that would be great.
I don't have a lot of faith. I just didn't know if they'd actually announce anything or not.
They haven't said anything one way or the other for the Switch. For everything else, it's all your purchases are tied to the system, so there's no sharing. Which it's such a bummer because they have that information. Like you can go look at your purchase history tied to your Nintendo ID account, and my Nintendo Network ID account is also tied to all my systems. So like it's all tied together on their website. It's just they just don't want to do the cross-buy thing.
They're doing things in a very Nintendo-like fashion. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all a very Nintendo-like fashion.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a neat thing, and I will play. I do have some backlog games that I will eventually play on it.
What's on your backlog? Just curious.
I'm sorry?
What's on your backlog? Just curious.
Oh, geez, for 3DS?
Yeah.
All right, let me go.
I mean, if you have to go like pull up,
I don't actually know off the top of my head.
Play Radiant Historia. I think that's a 3DS game that they're doing.
I played that on the DS, so I've.
Oh really?
Yeah,
they're doing a re-release or a remaster.
Yeah, they are doing a remaster of that. That was a really good game. I liked it a lot. But I have already played it. Let's see. Well, the Fire Emblem Echoes that came out this year is one.
Okay.
I want to try an Etrian Odyssey game, which I had gotten 4 digitally in a sale, but 5 is apparently coming out soon, so maybe I'd do that one. I also have the Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies game that I may play. The Persona Q games I may or may not end up playing. So it's just like a weird hodgepodge of games.
Okay.
Some of the old Dragon Quest games they've been remaking.
It's also interesting. I kind of wonder if they'll continue the support for the 3DS because, from what I've seen of the Switch, like its portability is almost like a nice to have more than like it being like a true portable system. And maybe I've got that wrong, but like the 3 hours of battery life and whatever makes it feel like maybe the Switch.
Yeah, I'm curious what they'll do with that as well. They're very clearly still supporting the 2DS right now, but it's also hard to tell if it's just because like Hey Pikmin just came out. So it's hard to tell if this is just like still catching things that have been in development for a while and they're just still coming out. So,
yeah, I mean that's really what it feels like to me is just like, hey, this stuff's been in development. This is the last batch of games that are going to come out. Here's a piece of hardware that is cheap. We'll give you access to all those libraries, and also will it's cheap for us to make too. The
2DS really does feel like, here's the last, best, cheapest model of the 3DS. We're tying a bow on this platform and its life. So, like, if you got anything fine. You want to left do on the 3DS, like, this is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah. So, and we'll, I am fully expecting that by the end of this year, there will be some sort of a sunsetting plan in place or something like that for that console as a whole.
Which. Yeah, I mean, it deserves it. It was, I think, for my money, the 3DS has been a fantastic console. It's tons of great games. So, I mean, if no one's ever had a 3DS or even a DS, because the 3DS is backwards compatible, like this would be a great way to just like have a huge access to a huge library.
Yeah, there's probably a good solid 10,000 hours worth of content across those two systems to play.
Probably.
And I feel like I was exaggerating whenever I said that, but now I'm not quite sure that I was exaggerating.
You're probably not.
I mean, there are Monster Hunter games on that system, right?
Yes,
true.
there are.
There's a lot of RPGs. There's a lot of Mario games. There's a lot of Zelda games. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, when JRPGs left consoles during the 360 and PS3 era, when they largely left consoles, they all went to the 3DS and DS.
And randomly, the Vita. I mean, everyone forgets that exists, but I'm pretty sure that 93% of the Vita's game library is actually just JRPGs that came to America, but never quite made it to a console. So, yeah.
Yep. Handhelds are big in Japan, and so are JRPGs.
Yep, every time I take the train in Persona 5, there's a dude sitting there playing his Vita. So that's how I know it's big over there. But yes,
we did see a girl playing a Vita in front of Meiji Park in Japan. Yeah. That was perhaps one of the only encounters. But
yeah, we saw every time I saw someone playing a handheld, I noted it, and I don't remember at this point because it's been a while. But I saw more Vitas than 3DSs when we were there. Saw probably 2 or 3 Vitas and 1 or 2 3DSs.
Visual novels are big in Japan. I mean, that's kind of what that system is now. It's your visual novel generator. So what else have you been playing?
Yeah, so last episode I talked a lot about Pyre. So I don't necessarily need to regurgitate all of that, but I did finish Pyre, and when I played it, it was kind of a whirlwind. So, like, following beating it, like, kind of in the days after that in its wake, it kind of, like, I actually digested how it went, and I really, really like that game. Okay. And I really like the way it, like, kind of just the nature of that world and its characters and how stuff wraps up, in that it, like, it doesn't feel like, because there's like a lot of choices you can make throughout the game, and the way it ends, like all of your characters can end in a very different spot depending on what you do. Yeah. And the game does a really good job at not portraying any of it as quote unquote bad or good. So So it just kind of is like, yeah, here's what happened, and that's that.
Okay.
So I think that's really interesting, and I think this is actually a game I would love to do a spoiler cast for, because I think there's a lot of really interesting narrative stuff to dig into for this game. I think it has a lot of really fascinating like motifs and stuff going on that it never, and this is something I've appreciated about all of Supergiant's games, is it never feels like they're preaching or like beating you over the head with stuff. It feels like they just make a world and things happen in it, and they don't designate good or bad, and they just let you take what you want from it. And I think that's really fascinating, and I think they do it in this game actually better than they've ever done that.
Yeah, so Nate, you said that you wanted to jump in and talk about Pyre a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can share what my experience has been. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm enjoying it a lot more now than I was at the start. I feel like the game starts a little slow, maybe.
I agree, for sure.
Like, probably the first 4 or 5 hours was a lot of slow build-up, and it often felt like they were trying to portray a world to me through all these like questions and mysteries, and nicely not just giving me a big info dump about how everything works, but like giving just a little bit in a way that made me feel as if I wasn't getting enough to understand anything. So for the first few hours, I was just kind of like, okay, this is another name that I don't know. Is this guy important? What are all these different places and people we're talking about? I don't understand anything.
Right.
But it's picked up a lot in a few hours after that initial climb.
Yeah, and for me, I don't know if it's been similar for you. As for me, as I went, because I had the same opening experience that you just described, but then as I went through the game and you start encountering all of these characters and things in the world, you start piecing it together, and you start internalizing that stuff more.
Yeah, and I'm definitely at that point where I'm starting to get a better grip on what the world is like. I still don't know. It still feels a little almost bloated to me. There's just so many characters.
Yeah, there are a lot.
And I don't want to be down on it for that, because I think they put a lot of work into the characters clearly. But I just haven't felt that the sheer size of the cast is warranted yet. Even though I can appreciate the craft behind it.
Yeah. Well, an interesting thing that happens in that game is they give you meet a lot of characters up front.
Yeah.
But then due to the nature of the liberation rights, you actually lose characters during the game. So by the end of the game, you actually have a very small crew. So it actually narrows the amount of characters you're interacting with as the game goes on.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about your characters that you travel with, but like all the other groups too, and all the other legends about historical figures, and this is a lot.
It is.
But I do enjoy it, and I've been enjoying the orb sports a lot more recently. I had a couple of games this morning. I played a couple of the rights, which is what this game's fake sport is, that were just like super nail biters, like incredibly close and fast paced. And I was just like on the edge of my seat the whole time. And when I won, I was like pumping my fist.
Yeah.
So
they get really exciting later on.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot better as far as my understanding of the world and just the intensity of the matches. Whereas like that first round, for like I said, the first 4 or 5 hours, the actual gameplay part, the sport, is a little dull. But
I agree.
You do kind of have to learn the ropes in order for it to become that more meaningful, fast-paced game, I think.
Yeah, and I mentioned that last time as well. I'm definitely in agreement of that it starts slow, and I enjoyed pretty much every aspect of that game more and more as it went. And my highest thoughts on the game came when I finished it. That's like my appreciation of it never stopped going up from start to finish, but it did. Those first few hours were absolutely slow.
Yeah, and I think that's the trajectory I'm on, and I don't want to, make it seem bad for that, because it's not a super long game anyway.
Right.
So asking the obligatory, I guess, reference questions, like, So I played Bastion and I liked it. These are the same guys that did Bastion and Transistor, right? Super Giant? Okay. Mm-hmm. I played Bastion and I liked it. I played Transistor and I felt like it also had a slow ramp, but
yeah,
it came out a lot weirder.
And Transistor also had the same kind of dense lore that Pyre has, where they throw a lot of information at you.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I mean, Transistor I enjoyed a lot less because it felt like it was really playing for a second playthrough, which I didn't do. It felt like as you get to the end of the game, you get a lot of abilities and the game becomes very interesting, but at the beginning it's almost kind of dull. When you talk about Pyre, do you feel like it does kind of the same thing? I'm feeling slow ramp here.
Yeah, yes and no. So from a mechanical standpoint, yes, you have that slow ramp and it's most interesting at the end. From a narrative standpoint, I think it wraps up very well, where in a way that a second playthrough would almost, I won't say undo your first playthrough, but it's like, so I mean, you make some decisions about the characters during the game, and actually a really interesting aspect of Pyre. I don't know if you were aware of this, Nate, but the game never, whether you lose for every single right you play in, your what'd you call it, orb sports matches?
Orb sports.
Whether you win or lose, the game keeps going. So there is no game over. There is no retry.
Yeah.
It just goes.
Yeah, and it tells you that. And I have been committed to the idea that I won't restart matches if I'm losing, which is just ramping up the intensity for me as it gets more difficult.
And that is 100% how I'd recommend everyone doing this game, because based on your results of winning, losing, and also who you choose to send on in the liberation rites and those kind of things, and who you choose to use in matches, like where characters end up at the end of the game can change drastically depending on all those factors. So it makes the story feel very tailored in an interesting way, I think, and because you're never redoing anything, like you're going to just go straight through and see your story. Which there was a moment for me, like probably about a half or 2/3 of the way through the game, where one of my characters made some comments that made it think they may not want to win a liberation rite or something. So it's like there can actually be narrative reasons for choosing to not win a game. Like on borderline throwing a game can have narrative consequences that you may think are actually more beneficial for what you want to do.
Right.
And that's where the game starts getting really interesting, because it really starts diving into like, what does winning and losing mean? Like, what is like, what are you after here? And like all of this stuff. And it starts branching into some really weird directions.
Okay.
So like from that standpoint, like doing multiple playthroughs would be kind of strange or interesting. But from a mechanical sense, it definitely has that ramp up that we were talking about, where it was the most interesting at the end. I don't think it does any New Game Plus stuff. So if you did start a new game, you'd have to go through the slow ramp again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when I mentioned New Game Plus, I just got the feeling that Transistor kind of wanted you to do a second game, because you end out at the end of the game, the gameplay and the mechanics are the most interesting.
Yeah, both Bastion and Transistor, I feel like, gained something from doing a New Game Plus, and I don't know that this game is going to be the same in that respect.
Yeah, I don't feel like it would. I don't even know that it allows a New Game Plus.
Yeah, I don't know if it has that, but I don't think there's as much reason for a second playthrough or a New Game Plus in this as there was with Bastion and Transistor.
I have one question for Nate.
Sure.
The announcer guy for the rights.
He's great.
Okay. I was just making sure you're on board with his ridiculous voice.
He's the best. I like him.
Yeah, he's amazing. He just, I'm not even going to try and imitate it, but he just has like this really like over the top, high pitched like voice.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. He's
got a great accent. He's super into it all the time.
Yeah.
But he's like cheeky too. So like he kind of makes fun of you a lot throughout the game. But and then when you win, he's like, "Oh, okay. I suppose you are the best."
That's funny.
Yeah, he sounds like the nerdiest like DM you could ever have.
But he's super into it. He's super earnest.
Yeah, he is. He actually, I don't know if you've gotten this far, Nate, but you end up finding out his history and how he got to that position.
Okay.
He's a character who has story in that game too.
Well, of course he is. Because,
of course he is.
Because everything this game has pages of backstory.
But yeah, I loved his voice and his narration.
Yeah, it's good. And the art style, I'm sure you already talked about this last time, but the art for this game is just top notch.
Yeah, I think artistically, like, this might be their best game so far, and that's coming from a high bar from their previous game.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So other than Pyre, you said you had something else that you wanted to talk about, Flex?
Yeah, the one other thing was I also finished Hollow Knight.
Yay!
And
nice.
I
That one
really, really, really like Hollow Knight.
Nice.
That is a fantastic game from top to bottom. Like, I really enjoyed playing that thing in its entirety, and I did a pretty completionist run of it. So I saw pretty much everything there was to see.
Yeah, I really want to get to that.
Yeah, it's
short list item for myself as well.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, if you're not someone who likes Metroid type games at all, like, it may not be for you. But like, otherwise, I give it the strongest recommendation. Like, it does that style of game really well, but also with enough of its own touches that make it different. Like, it doesn't really feel just like a Metroid game. It has a whole lot of other touches to it. And I just really got into that world. Like, by the end of the game, I felt like I had really mastered and understood that world, and had absorbed a lot of the lore, and like, the progression through the game was really satisfying. And I chased down a bunch of optional bosses and fought them, and that was really satisfying. And the combat gets really good. Like, by the time you get all the upgrades and all your charms to equip, like, there's a lot of great combat options, and the combat stays very tight throughout. And there are a lot of really good bosses late game. It's just all around a really satisfying game. I had a blast with it the entire way through.
Yeah. I have a couple questions about that one. So, one of the common complaints with that style of game is backtracking. Do you feel like that's a big part of the game, or not as much in this one?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's fine with me, as long as I know that going in. I can usually get through it, but that is something that I struggle with occasionally.
Yeah. So I did a completionist run, so I ended up backtracking a lot.
Yeah.
If you played it more straight, you would. I'm just guessing because I did do a completionist, but if you played it pretty straight, you might not have to do a lot of backtracking.
Mm-hmm.
There are also a handful of fast travel points in the game.
Okay.
So you never have to backtrack across the entire world. Like, it's usually like, go to a fast travel point, travel to the point closest to your destination, and then you'll have to, backtrack a little ways.
Right.
But most of the backtracking was just me going back to, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I got this ability. I think I can use this back on this other part of the map. I'm going to go there and figure that out. And it would usually just be for an optional upgrade. So
yeah.
If you played it pretty straight, your backtracking would be minimal. But there's going to be some amount of backtracking no matter what, because this is definitely that kind of game.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of upgrades, is it like a fairly standard, I don't know the word I'm trying to think of, like, I guess a linear progression of ramping up power, or is there a lot of like choice in player builds or anything like that? Do you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, I know what you're asking, and the answer is a little of both.
Okay.
So your main upgrades that are required to get through the game are predominantly things that allow you to get around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So those are going to be things that, like, you're just going to get all of those in a progression, and you're going to build and be stronger from.
Like Metroid upgrades, where you get
it's going to be
better
things,
beams and the better suits and the high jump and all that.
Yes. So you get a lot of the mobility powers equivalent to like the high jump boots.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main things that you're going to get through main story progression.
Okay.
There are optional upgrades that are like, you get a better sword. Like, you can upgrade. Well, it's a nail because you're a bug. So your weapon is a nail. You can upgrade your nail optionally. There's no armor or anything. The only offense defense things you get are your nail you can upgrade, and then there are basically heart pieces in the game. You get 4 mask shards. You get an extra mask, which is an extra hit you can take.
Okay.
Those are the only upgrades that make you just straight up stronger.
Yeah.
Then it's a lot of the high jump equivalent maneuverability stuff, and then so all of that stuff is basically straight up getting stronger. But then on the other side, there are these things called charms you can equip.
Okay.
And that's where the customizability comes in, because you have a certain number of slots to equip a certain number of charms.
Mm-hmm.
And those have a lot of varying effects. So you'll have a charm that's like, oh, you can attack more quickly, or this gives you a longer reach on your attack, or your spells are stronger. You have like some projectile spells. Or you heal quicker because you have like, so healing's actually a really part of this game, because you absorb this stuff from enemies that you can stand still and hold down a button to use it to heal.
Mm-hmm.
But you're very vulnerable while you do that. So if you're like trying to do that during a boss fight or something, that's a real high like risk reward thing.
Gotcha.
So there'll be charms that'll like make you heal faster or heal for more, or that kind of stuff. There's all sorts, like there are like 30 something charms in the game. So like, and you can, at your most powerful at the end of the game, you can probably equip like maybe 4 or 5 of them.
Okay.
So there's a lot of customizability in how you do there. And I did this all the time. Like I had my standard exploring set of charms, but then when I'd encounter a boss, I had like 2 or 3 different builds for bosses depending on like what the boss was. So if it was like a longer, more endurance kind of boss, that I would equip like a bunch of fast healing and like that kind of stuff. So like stuff that would let me absorb more of the healing juice.
Mm-hmm.
So I could heal more frequently. But then if it was a boss that was like a really fast paced fight where I just never had opportunities to heal, and then I would have like a different set to account for that.
So you feel like the different builds you used made a meaningful difference, and you were able to
absolutely,
and you were able to swap between them when you wanted.
Yeah, so you
That's
can
good.
you can only swap them on the benches, which are like your save stations.
Okay.
But like if I die on a boss and I'd be like, oh, I think this other set would work better, then I'd respawn at the bench because it sends you back to the last bench you rested at, and I'd switch up my charms, and it would oftentimes make a big difference.
Nice.
So that was pretty satisfying. So yeah, you definitely get a lot of just getting upgrades to make you stronger and more capable, but then you also have the customizable ones in the charm.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And if there are no other questions, the kind of my one like final thought is like, one of the things I think that game does really well is it's a very simple and focused game. So like it's very clear at communicating everything it wants to communicate, and it doesn't like, nothing feels like overdone or bloated. So like stuff all the way from like combat to platforming to exploration to like the bosses or the lore, like everything feels very deliberate and focused, and it feels like that game had a lot of opportunities throughout the whole game to just like add more stuff, like more mechanics, more whatever, but it feels very simple and pure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that works out to its advantage really well.
That's good. Did you feel like there was a lot of like, I don't want to just use the term story, but like meat about the world and your character and any other events or characters in the game that was like interesting to you?
Yeah. It's kind of conveyed in that Dark Souls like way where
that's the feeling I've gotten. So I don't know how much it is. It's just actual story versus that kind of stuff. But there was stuff there that you found interesting.
Yeah, if you don't go seek it, you're not really going to find much. But I did, because in my completionist way, I did discover a lot of stuff, and I thought the lore, like the history of that world, was pretty interesting. And there are also multiple endings you can get based on stuff you find.
Okay.
And nice. if you get the quote unquote true ending and like uncover it all, like I think that's pretty satisfying.
Nice.
So yeah, I did enjoy that stuff. It's not very thick ever. Again, it's pretty focused and simple. Mm-hmm. But I thought the nature of that world and like the characters was interesting in what it was trying to do.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of that genre, so I'll probably steer clear of it. But at the same time, it sounds like they made a really good one of those. Nice.
Yeah, I do really like these kind of games, and I think this is the best one of these that I've played in a long, long time. And It's also, I like that it's not like, so I really liked Axiom Verge. Axiom Verge felt like a pretty straight homage to Metroid, like Super Metroid.
Yeah.
This game feels like it's evolved it.
Okay.
Something new.
Yeah, this feels like something new. Like, it feels like they've taken that formula and taken the next step or two.
Nice. Yeah. So, did you have any other games that you wanted to bring up?
Nope, that's it for me.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about. I'm still playing Persona 5. I just finished the second Palace.
Okay.
And so I have a long way to go in that game, but I'm still really enjoying it. I took a little bit of a break from it, not intentionally, just life got a little busy. So I haven't played as much of it as I've been wanting to, but
some Final Fantasy 12 also happened in there.
Yeah, there was a Final Fantasy 12 quick break. And then other than that, just a couple of other random things that have been taking up my evenings mostly. But I'm looking forward to getting back into that at my if I play as much as possible, meaning all the hours that I have when I'm not have other commitments, I'll finish that game sometime around Thanksgiving.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I'm shooting for. But on the side, I'm still been playing a decent amount of Star Trek Online. The MMO bug has yet to go away, and so I've just been...
I'm right there with you, buddy.
Yeah, I've just been playing that. It's probably what I'm going to do whenever we get off of here. I actually found some pretty neat resources online for how to optimize my ship. So I spent $30. I bought a new ship, and I am slowly but surely getting it outfitted to be a killing machine. Which a Federation starship being a killing machine is kind of funny. Other than that, I haven't really been playing anything worth talking about. I've been trying to find a new mobile game just to sort of play whenever I'm at work, and I've settled on something that's called Eternium, which is sort of a Diablo-esque clone for, I think it's on iOS and Android, but I'm playing it on Android right now. And it's a fun little dumb game. I don't think it's anything that, like, I'm never going to play it when I have access to the rest of my house or even one of my handhelds. But whenever I'm just sitting around at work, if I've got an extra 15 or 20 minutes, I'll pick that up and play that a little bit. But yeah, it's free to play. It's got microtransactions like everything else does. But I don't know. It's just kind of neat.
Do you kill things and get loot?
You do kill things. You do get loot.
Okay.
Are there any meters?
There are meters, and the meters get filled. There are also numbers. The numbers go up.
Do the numbers get bigger as the game goes?
The numbers do get bigger.
All right.
Sold.
There's also loot. It comes in green, blue, purple, and orange varieties.
All right.
That's pretty. I mean, it's dumb, but it's also kind of fun. So if if you need something to take up some time, there are certainly worse things to do. But
nice.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, that's pretty much what's been going on in my corner of the world. What I've got coming up is I am going to keep on playing Persona. I'm going to keep on playing Star Trek Online. And when those two games are not what I'm wanting to do, No Man's Sky just came out with this really big update that the internet seems to really like. So I'm going to take No Man's Sky and I'm going to delete my old save because I downloaded a whole bunch of cheat engine stuff and sort of blew a hole in that one. And I'm going to restart that from the beginning. Not that I've gotten that far before anyway. And just see if there is any meaningful difference or not. So I'll be able to report back in a couple of weeks, and then hopefully I can tell you that No Man's Sky wasn't the worst purchase of 2017 that I've made.
Nice. We'll revisit your rant from a few episodes ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. Like, I went and read the patch notes. Some of it had meaning to me, some of it didn't. But like I say, the internet seems to really like it, and it's the first time I saw on various websites and forums the game talked about in any sort of a positive light. It's been pretty negative to this point, but I'll report back in a couple weeks and I'll let you know how that goes. Will, you've been pretty quiet. What are you planning on picking up or starting here soon?
Started playing. I've played maybe an hour of this game called Spectromancer.
Have you been doing it while Fowler's been talking about Pyre and stuff?
No, I was just kind of listening,
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been playing that, and that actually seems pretty interesting. It's sort of like a card game, but and you don't really kind of create your own decks.
Okay.
You sort of, it is kind of a card game, but it's sort of, you pick sort of a class and you're kind of given a deck, and so it's kind of an interesting thing. And then I think I played like 2 hours of The Witcher, and it keeps just
The Witcher 3, right?
Yeah, Witcher 3, and it just feels really daunting, just knowing kind of how long it is.
It's super daunting. It is daunting.
And so basically, like,
you're like halfway done. You're good.
I started it, and then I was kind of like, man, I'd rather play some short things. And so I think that's kind of how I got through Masochisia and the Magic Circle, because I was like, well, this is like an hour and a half. This is like 3 hours.
You gotta have the commitment.
Yeah. So I don't know. I may go back to that if I'm feeling courageous. I've been playing Spectromancer a lot.
And I mean, like, good night. When I sat down to play that game, it was like, all right, I can't play anything at the same time. I just have to sit down, and 100 hours later, I finally got done with it. I think it was
I took a staycation. I took a staycation from work to play The Witcher 3.
That's pretty much what you have to do.
That's the only way it was going to happen.
It's a good game. It's a big game, and I totally understand your hesitance to really get too far into it.
Is Spectromancer a mobile game, or
no? It's a Steam. It's on Steam. It's a PC thing.
Yeah. Flex, what about you? What's coming up on your playlist?
You've heard of Persona 5, yes?
I have heard of the Persona 5.
All right.
Yeah.
Now that I've finished, I kind of got sucked into both Pyre and Hollow Knight, but at this point, I'm getting back to Persona 5, and I want to give it some good, solid attention for the next few weeks. So I'm in the middle of the third palace, and I'm going to keep it rolling.
All right. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
What you got coming up?
I'm also getting back into some games. I was juggling a few too many, so I'm probably going to try to knock out Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, maybe Final Fantasy V, and I'm also planning on starting a game called Cryptarch.
Okay. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the Cryptarch. He decoded all of my engrams. Hope that goes well for you.
Oh no, I didn't get that reference. I'm questioning life decisions about buying this game now.
Yeah, I did the same thing with No Man's Sky. Don't worry, you'll get over that never. So good luck. Nate, what about you?
I'll finish up Pyre, and then I'm probably going to jump into either Hollow Knight or Neo, which are still on my list for this year.
I forgot. Neo was a game that came out this year back in March
I remember that from February.
I still haven't gotten around to it, so it's on my list.
That's funny. All right. Well, I think that's just about going to wrap it up for us adults who have been talking about cool stuff. This has been ATACS, episode number 19. We will be back in your regular channels in about 2 weeks. And hopefully by then we'll have things to talk about that aren't just Persona. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.